I worked at Silverwater Jail initially in Sydney. On my very first day of teaching, it's a pretty surreal experience because you go into the classroom, you're sitting there, and then they bring in the prisoners. And so I hadn't really had much interaction with prisoners before. As I say in the book, like sitting before me was a murderer, an armed robber, and a rapist. And then they closed the door, so it's just you and them in the classroom. And at first, you're looking out the window, you can see the barbed wire. They're all wearing green. You're in civilian clothes. They've been marched in there by someone in a blue uniform, and they sit you down, and then these guys have pens, and you think, well, that could be a weapon. The door is a few meters away. Can I get out the door? They have a duress button on the wall, and you'd hope that someone would come quickly. But after a while, you get into teacher mode and you realise that they are there to be students as well.
What were you teaching them, Paul?
I was mainly teaching literacy and numeracy, and I also taught basic computers.
And how did prisoners take to you?
You sort of get a whole lot of mixed reactions. There are some who see you as a source. So there's something called prisoner shopping in jail, officers shopping in jail, where they'll come around and someone will ask you for a pen, and then if you give them a pen or a piece of paper or something, they'll come around and ask for more and more, and then they're trying to get you on their side, so then they may be asking you a bigger favour later on. Some prisoners saw you as an educator, as someone who was going to help them, and others came up to education as a way of just getting out of work or being off the yard. So, when you wanted them to do some work, then you might be a little bit of an annoyance to them. In general, it was a place of, refuge for the prisoners to be up in education.
ABC Gold Coast Brekkie, we're talking about the novel The Criminal Class. It is a fictionalised work by Paul A MacNamara, the voice you can hear right now, but based very much on his experiences as working as a prison teacher. Paul, why did you want to do this type of work?
I didn't really know that there was even teaching inside jails before I applied for it. I was an adult education teacher and teaching, often I was teaching migrants or the unemployed, literacy and numeracy. And I just applied for a position that came up, and that's how so it was more an opportunity that came up rather than any planning on my part.
Did you enjoy the work?
Yeah, I did. It's frustrating because there's, what's sort of appalling to me was when I first went in there, just the low levels of literacy of many of the prisoners. You can see how they get trapped into that cycle of reoffending because they have so little opportunities outside because of their low levels of literacy. So to be able to help in that way was rewarding. Recall a Sudanese refugee who was getting into a lot of trouble in the prison, and he was always being late. But once he got to education, we found out through doing assessments that, he couldn't hardly read at all in English, and he couldn't read a clock. To be able to give people skills like that, is a rewarding career.
On ABC Gold Coast Brekkie, a former prison teacher, but now author, The Criminal Class is drawn from his life experiences. I'm talking about author Paul A MacNamara. My name's Nicole Dwyer. The anecdotes that you use, given that you've no doubt changed the names, are they all true? For example, an inmate who worked in the kitchen trying to smuggle steaks by walking around with meat in his shoes all day?
I didn't actually have to make up a lot because so much of it was extraordinary in the first place. And as you say, there was a kitchen at Silverwater Jail. Prisoners have access to things like steak and, which is supposed to be cut up and processed because they feed across the whole state. Prison guards noticed that steak was going missing and they could never find out where it was. They would search prisoners and, no one would have anything in their pockets. And one guy, they strip searched everybody, and one guy was still standing in his sand shoes. And when they got him to step out of his sand shoes, the stakes were in his shoes. So he was tenderising them, I suppose. But
What was the end game in this?
well, the end game is that once you get down to the wing, which is the accommodation unit, stakes are a high demand item. So other prisoners would want to buy the steaks off them, or for the prisoner himself, he would have steaks that he could cook up.
How much notice have you been taking of the Queensland government and the new youth crime laws?
As I said, I'm not really an expert on crime and, the programs, but you do see that there's so many outside factors as well. Like education is certainly what they call a criminogenic factor. One of the reasons why you would end up having a life of crime, so low levels of education contribute to that. I also sort of allude to in the book, again, like not as an expert, but just as an observer, putting all your bad eggs in the one basket. What pro-social models does someone gain from that? I know there were students that I had who would tell me that what they learnt from their first experience in jail was how to do a better bank job. I wouldn't say that very many people I came across were innately evil.
I really appreciate your time this morning, Paul A MacNamara on ABC Gold Coast Brekkie. His book is called The Criminal Class, Memoir of a Prison Teacher. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you very much, Nicole.